The US has confirmed it's sending 2,000 more troops to Europe in a response to what it says is the current security environment. They'll go to Poland, Germany and Romania. The deployment will not be permanent, and the Pentagon says they will not fight in Ukraine. Moscow's described the deployment as destructive, and Vladimir Putin has told the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson in a phone call that NATO is ignoring its concerns about security. Turkey says 12 migrants have frozen to death near the border with Greece after Greek officials turned them back. A Greek minister says the claims are baseless and that the deaths were a tragedy. And a minister in the Northern Ireland Assembly has ordered his officials to suspend the post-Brexit checks on goods being moved between the province and mainland Great Britain. The Irish government says the decision breaks international law.
Officials in Japan are struggling to contain the coronavirus as it spreads unchecked across the country. They confirmed a record number of new cases on Wednesday. The daily count topped 90,000. 886 people were listed in serious condition. That's up 82 from Tuesday. Nearly half of Japan's 47 prefectures, including Tokyo, saw record daily infections. New cases in the capital exceeded 20,000 for the first time. The spike comes despite extensive preventive efforts. 34 prefectures have imposed quasi-emergency measures in a bid to keep the medical system from being overwhelmed. Another prefecture, Wakayama, has asked the central government to add it to the list. Safeguards include asking bars and restaurants to close early and not to serve alcohol. The virus also appears to have struck the Japanese team at the Beijing Winter Olympics. Team officials say a skier tested positive on Tuesday. They say the athlete had tested negative before traveling to China. Japanese scientists using the Fugaku supercomputer, the world's fastest, have created a simulation that shows how airborne droplets spread the Omicron variant. They compared the risk of transmitting the virus between masked and unmasked carriers. There's a nearly 100% chance that an unmasked carrier will pass on the virus during a 15-minute conversation at a distance of half a meter or less. Even with a mask, the probability was about 14% at that range. The head scientist behind the simulation said the results show it may be time to review social distancing guidelines. The 2-meter rule, followed since the early days of the pandemic, may not be appropriate for more infectious variants. The government is trying to speed up its rollout of booster shots. Companies and universities will be able to start administering a third dose to their employees and students later this month. Meanwhile, the U.S. military in Japan has told NHK that there is little benefit in assigning blame about possible links between an increase in coronavirus cases at its military installations and surrounding local communities. The United States Forces Japan was responding to an NHK inquiry. The issue arose after new infections surged in areas where U.S. military installations are located, including Okinawa and Yamaguchi prefectures. The U.S. military last September eased anti-COVID-19 restrictions, such as no longer requiring pre-arrival testing of service members. This was in breach of an agreement with Japanese authorities. The USFJ responded, USFJ continuously reviews and updates our health protection policies as required and based on the most recent scientific data. It also said we have not wavered in our commitment to keep personnel healthy. However, the Japanese government last December confirmed the easing of restrictions by the U.S. military. Asked why it did not promptly share this information with the Japanese side, the USFJ said, we have kept our government of Japan counterparts informed of measures being taken. Some people have pointed out a possible link between the rise in COVID-19 cases in surrounding municipalities and clusters at U.S. military installations. The USFJ said there is little benefit in assigning blame during this ongoing global pandemic as COVID-19 does not discriminate. It added the high transmissibility of the most recent Omicron variant has increased COVID-19 cases around the world, even in remote areas with stringent testing and quarantine requirements, such as Antarctica, for example. It also said USFJ will continue to monitor and adjust COVID-19 mitigation measures in cooperation with Government of Japan counterparts. The disaster-hit nation of Tonga has imposed an anti-coronavirus lockdown after confirming cases of community infection. The Pacific nation was hit by an undersea volcanic eruption and tsunami on January 15th. The Tongan authorities introduced strict restrictions on Wednesday evening covering economic and other activities. Local media report that Prime Minister Huakava Meiliku says 2 people tested positive for the virus on Tuesday. The 2 are reportedly port workers in the capital, Nuku'alofa. Tonga is still suffering from last month's disaster. Drinking water has been contaminated by the tsunami and volcanic ash. The international community is trying to help. It is unclear whether the local infections are related to aid deliveries. Tonga has insisted on minimal contact between locals and outside aid workers. Russia's ambassador to Japan has warned Tokyo not to join Western nations in imposing sanctions on Moscow over Ukraine. The United States and other countries have threatened massive economic sanctions if Russia invades Ukraine. At a news conference in Tokyo on Wednesday, Mikhail Galuzin reacted sharply to possible sanctions.
This will be equal to cutting off relations. This would be equal to severing relations.
He reiterated Moscow's stance that any expansion of NATO is unacceptable to Russia and accused the U.S. and its allies of trying to maintain Western dominance and influence over the world. The ambassador also referred to remarks by Japan's Prime Minister Kishida Fumio on continuing coordination with the U.S. and its partners by taking strong action in response to any attack.
They do not contribute to the creation of a good atmosphere, positive atmosphere in dialogue between Russia and Japan.
Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Matsuno Hirokazu declined to comment on the ambassador's remarks.
Japan is monitoring the Ukraine situation with serious concern and will deal with the matter appropriately.
Matsuno also said Japan confirmed its cooperation with the U.S. during a bilateral video summit last month, as well as in phone talks between the 2 foreign ministers on Wednesday. A once prominent member of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's family has resurfaced. It's been 2 years since Kim's aunt, Kim Kyung-hee, was last seen in public. She disappeared from view after her husband's execution nearly a decade ago on charges of trying to overthrow the state. Kim Kyung-hee was shown seated near the North Korean leader and his wife on state-run TV. They were attending a performance marking the Lunar New Year on Tuesday. Kim Kyung-hee is the daughter of North Korea's founder Kim Il-sung and the sister of former leader Kim Jong-il. Her husband, Chan Son-taek, was considered a mentor to Kim Jong-un, but he suffered a fall from grace in 2013 and was executed over treason charges. North Korea is preparing to mark the 80th anniversary of the birth of Kim Jong-il on February 16th. Observers say the media coverage of Kim Kyung-hee may be intended to project a sense of unity within the leader's family. Myanmar has been through a tumultuous year since the military took power in a coup last February. After a violent crackdown on peaceful protests, civilians have turned to armed resistance, but they are facing multiple challenges in a potentially drawn-out conflict. NHK World's Sayatea Krakuntot reports.
This footage shows a fierce battle between soldiers and local resistance fighters in Kayah State in eastern Myanmar. Since December last year, the junta has intensified attacks in ethnic-controlled areas where ethnic armed groups have been fighting against the military since the coup, along with civilian forces.
The military is just firing blindly, at random.
20-year-old Sai Jodhura, not his real name, took part in peaceful protests following the coup. But last September, the military attacked his hometown in Kayah State. Soldiers reportedly torched dozens of homes, including his.
I thought we can't overthrow the military just by raising three fingers. The only remaining option is to take up arms and revolt.
Sai decided to join a group of armed young fighters. Since then, about 20 of his friends have died in combat.
In my first battle, a lot of heavy artillery fell and some of my comrades died. I was so sad, and the thought came to my mind, is this the end of our youth? Is our youth nothing but war?
After taking up arms, he found they could not compete with the military's firepower.
We can't compare our weapons with the military because they have superior equipment, such as heavy artillery. We're having to sell our farms, property, and vehicles just to buy guns.
An underground network has sprung up to supply weapons to armed groups in secret. Young people from Yangon are using 3D printers to make guns. They say they plan to increase production so they can supply weapons to more resistance groups in the future.
Even though a lot of people want to, participate in the armed forces, we don't have weapons. So when we came to this site, we try and help solve the issue.
The pro-democracy National Unity Government says there's a long road ahead in this armed uprising.
We plan to form more battalions and provide them with good weapons, as the number of civilian fighters is increasing every day. Pressure from the international community of various kinds will be essential if my country is to achieve peace.
1 year after the coup in Myanmar, further violence appears inevitable. And as the fighting drags on, it is ordinary citizens who will pay the heaviest price. Sahathaya Karaikunthot, NHK World.
A hair-raising experience for some passengers on a plane in London Monday. Our meteorologist Sayaka Mori tells us about the aborted landing due to strong winds in world weather.
Hello there. A succession of low-pressure systems has caused strong winds over northern Europe, including the UK. Gusts were nearly 150 kilometers per hour in Stornoway in the United Kingdom. And because of the strong winds, even a skillful pilot had a hard time maneuvering the plane. Take a look at this video. A British Airways plane had to abort landing because of strong winds at Heathrow Airport during the day on Monday. Footage shows winds hitting the aircraft just before landing, making it hard to land safely. The UK and parts of the North Sea experienced strong gusts from winter storms named Curry as well as Malik. Another system is already affecting parts of the United Kingdom with strong winds, and there's a concern for very powerful winds affecting central and southern Germany. Be careful of strong winds, and temperatures are still on the warmer side in places like London, Paris, as well as the Iberian Peninsula, but looking pretty chilly in Moscow with high of only 6 degrees on your Thursday. Heavy snow has been piling up across the Sea of Japan side of the country. We are seeing more snowfall over the Hokuriku region because a snow cloud will develop over the Sea of Japan. Niigata could see a high of 5 degrees on Thursday. You could see thunder snow. Be careful of dangerous conditions. And talking about thunder, WMO has announced 2 world records for lightning. One is for the longest distance and the other is for the greatest duration. Lightning that traveled over the U.S. actually traveled 768 kilometers. That's the record, world record. And another lightning, which was detected over Argentina and Uruguay in 2020, lasted for 17 seconds, so slightly longer than a typical TV commercial. Amazing. That's it for me. Have a nice day.
President Putin now speaking out publicly as tensions continue to escalate over the situation in Ukraine, saying Russia's fundamental concerns are being ignored.
This just after U.S. officials urged Russia to pull its troops back from the Ukrainian border. So what is next? Joining us is Senator Roger Wicker, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Wicker, thanks for being with us. And we just got word just recently that thousands of troops are headed to that area. President Biden announcing that just a short while ago. And the U.S. is forcing Russia's hand into war. That's what President Putin is saying. Do you feel that we are doing enough to try and avoid conflict in that area? What more needs to be done? Are these troops going to make the difference?
What Vladimir Putin said about the West risking an escalation into war is exactly what every dictator in the last century has said when they're planning to do something. It is Vladimir Putin who brought over 100,000 troops to the eastern border of Ukraine. It is Vladimir Putin, the Russian dictator, who has brought elite troops from the eastern part of Russia into within 100 miles of the border of Belarus and Ukraine, very close to Kiev, the Ukrainian border. So when Vladimir Putin says the United States and NATO allies are about to start a war, I'll just have to say Adolf Hitler could not have said it better in the late 1930s. This is exactly what aggressors do when they're about to start a conflict.
You're sharing some of your thoughts here with us. Did some of your thoughts and insights change? You were part of that bipartisan group that traveled there to Ukraine. Did you learn something on that trip that informed better your thoughts and insights? And you came back and met with President Biden. What did you pass along to him after that trip?
I hope we got some insights. And let me tell you, first of all, it was a very unified, bipartisan delegation. Four Democrats, 3 Republicans. And we all absolutely said it is unthinkable that the United States and the West would stand idly by and let Russia do this. They have no intention of going back under the Russian thumb. And it is vital to our interest. If you're interested in Taiwan, if you're interested in a free Pacific, I can tell you China is watching what the United States is doing now. If you're interested in preventing a refugee crisis, not only in Eastern Europe, but in Western Europe, if you are interested in the fact that free democratic societies just never invade their neighbors, and the best way to keep peace is to let people make their own decisions, then you're interested in doing what we can to help Ukraine. And I'm glad the president is sending some 3,000 troops in to our NATO allies. I wish he had endorsed the Nord Stream 2 sanctions. And frankly, I wish, as former Secretary Panetta, a Democratic Secretary of Defense, has once said, I'm sorry that we've been sending the world a signal of relative weakness for the past year. But we are where we are now, and so I do appreciate at least this gesture on the part of the president.
Senator Wicker, I want to turn now to President Biden's pledge to nominate the nation's first black woman to the Supreme Court. You have said that that court nominee would be the beneficiary of affirmative action quota. And for some context, other presidents, specifically President Trump, saying he would nominate a very talented, brilliant woman. We had President Reagan saying he would choose the most qualified woman he could possibly find. How is President Biden's decision to search for a black woman any different than those former presidents?
Well, let me say, I don't think it's a good idea for a presidential candidate when he's behind in the polls headed to South Carolina to make a campaign promise like that. And I wasn't aware at the time of my interview that some 76% of Americans agree with that position. But let me also say this. This nominee, whoever she is, will be treated with courtesy, and I will determine my vote based on the qualifications and the judicial philosophy of whoever the president nominates.
But again, to that point, you believe this person is only getting the job because they're a black woman. You believe this is an affirmative action pick?
Well, I think if you ask, and I didn't run the poll, but the question was asked, is it best for the president to choose from among all qualified applicants for the job? And some 76% of Americans said yes to that, and 23% no.
Well, and again, it's very important there. 115 people have served on the Supreme Court. Only 5 have been women. And that first woman, Sandra Day O'Connor, only got there because there was a president who committed to doing so. And I guess, are you on board with this idea that we have to diversify? We have to make a conscious effort sometimes, because sometimes the woman or the black woman doesn't get a fair shake because the people making the pick don't look like them. So this is a good idea, as Lindsey Graham said, that the court should look more like America, and we should make a conscious decision to do so, yes?
I've said diversity on the court and diversity in government is a good thing.
All right, well, Senator Wicker, we appreciate a lot going on, a lot in the headlines, and you know you've been in some of those headlines here over the past few days. So we always appreciate the time, and we'll check in with you again, okay? Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
All right, folks, and just ahead here on GMA3, we're going to meet a young woman now helping others heal from a challenging and very human experience.
Yes, the artist using humor to help ease the sting of grief. GMA3 will be right back. Stay with us.
President Putin now speaking out publicly as tensions continue to escalate over the situation in Ukraine, saying Russia's fundamental concerns are being ignored.
This just after U.S. officials urged Russia to pull its troops back from the Ukrainian border. So what is next? Joining us is Senator Roger Wicker, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Wicker, thanks for being with us. And we just got word just recently that thousands of troops are headed to that area. President Biden announcing that just a short while ago. And the U.S. is forcing Russia's hand into war. That's what President Putin is saying. Do you feel that we are doing enough to try and avoid conflict in that area? What more needs to be done? Are these troops going to make the difference?
What Vladimir Putin said about the West risking an escalation into war is exactly what every dictator in the last century has said when they're planning to do something. It is Vladimir Putin who brought over 100,000 troops to the eastern border of Ukraine. It is Vladimir Putin, the Russian dictator, who has brought elite troops from the eastern part of Russia into within 100 miles of the border of Belarus and Ukraine, very close to Kiev, the Ukrainian border. So when Vladimir Putin says the United States and NATO allies are about to start a war, I'll just have to say Adolf Hitler could not have said it better in the late 1930s. This is exactly what aggressors do when they're about to start a conflict.
You're sharing some of your thoughts here with us. Did some of your thoughts and insights change? You were part of that bipartisan group that traveled there to Ukraine. Did you learn something on that trip that informed better your thoughts and insights? And you came back and met with President Biden. What did you pass along to him after that trip?
I hope we got some insights. And let me tell you, first of all, it was a very unified, bipartisan delegation. Four Democrats, 3 Republicans. And we all absolutely said it is unthinkable that the United States and the West would stand idly by and let Russia do this. They have no intention of going back under the Russian thumb. And it is vital to our interest. If you're interested in Taiwan, if you're interested in a free Pacific, I can tell you China is watching what the United States is doing now. If you're interested in preventing a refugee crisis, not only in Eastern Europe, but in Western Europe, if you are interested in the fact that free democratic societies just never invade their neighbors, and the best way to keep peace is to let people make their own decisions, then you're interested in doing what we can to help Ukraine. And I'm glad the president is sending some 3,000 troops in to our NATO allies. I wish he had endorsed the Nord Stream 2 sanctions, and frankly, I wish, as former Secretary Panetta, a Democratic Secretary of Defense, has once said, I'm sorry that we've been sending the world a signal of a relative weakness for the past year. But we are where we are now, and so I do appreciate at least this gesture on the part of the president.
Senator Wicker, I want to turn now to President Biden's pledge to nominate the nation's first black woman to the Supreme Court. You have said that that court nominee would be the beneficiary of affirmative action quota. And for some context, other presidents, specifically President Trump, saying he would nominate a very talented, brilliant woman. We had President Reagan saying he would choose the most qualified woman he could possibly find. How is President Biden's decision to search for a black woman any different than those former presidents?
Well, let me say, I don't think it's a good idea for a presidential candidate when he's behind in the polls, headed to South Carolina, to make a campaign promise like that. And I wasn't aware at the time of my interview that some 76% of Americans agree with that position. But let me also say this. This nominee, whoever she is, will be treated with courtesy, and I will determine my vote based on the qualifications and the judicial philosophy of whoever the president nominates.
But again, to that point, you believe this person is only getting the job because they're a black woman. You believe this is an affirmative action pick?
Well, I think if you ask, and I didn't run the poll, but the question was asked, is it best for the president to choose from among all qualified applicants for the job? And some 76% of Americans said yes to that, and 23% no.
Well, and again, it's very important there. 115 people have served on the Supreme Court. Only 5 have been women. And that first woman, Sandra Day O'Connor, only got there because there was a president who committed to doing so. And I guess, are you on board with this idea that we have to diversify? We have to make a conscious effort sometimes, because sometimes the woman or the black woman doesn't get a fair shake because the people making the pick don't look like them. So this is a good idea, as Lindsey Graham said, that the court should look more like America, and we should make a conscious decision to do so, yes?
I've said diversity on the court and diversity in government is a good thing.
All right, well, Senator Wicker, we appreciate a lot going on, a lot in the headlines, and you know you've been in some of those headlines here over the past few days. So we always appreciate the time, and we'll check in with you again, okay? Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
All right, folks, and just ahead here on GMA3, we're going to meet a young woman now helping others heal from a challenging and very human experience.
Yes, the artist using humor to help ease the sting of grief. GMA3 will be right back. Stay with us. Dr. Jen joining us now with some of the questions you've been asking online. First question, Dr. Jen. Already received my booster shot. How else can I protect myself?
So let's take a holistic view here. And remember, even though it seems like all the attention is about COVID, there are other things out there that we want to boost our immune system to help protect us against. So really take a big picture view. The best things for your immune system: rest, exercise, and a good diet. If you're talking specifically about an airborne respiratory pathogen like influenza, coronavirus, common cold, you know, we've talked about masks now for 2 years. We've talked about ventilation. We've talked about hand hygiene. All of those things really important. But it's so key not to only focus on COVID.
Good point. All right, Dr. Ashton, another one here. What is the best test I can request from my doctor to see what my hormone levels look like?
I love this question because there's so much myth and misconception out there, especially for women, about checking their hormone levels. And then I always say, don't do a test in medicine unless you know what you're going to do with the results of that test. And in gynecology, we don't measure estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone or any other hormones and then treat based on that number. We go by how the woman is feeling. There are exceptions, though. Men and testosterone, yes, that number is a target. So if it is low, doctors will prescribe testosterone to a man to get that number to a certain range. And thyroid, those are really the big exceptions to that. For women, it's a little more of a gray zone. It can give you a picture of where a woman is, but then we don't follow that up and say you need more of this, less of that. That's just not generally accepted gynecologic practice. Good question, though.
All right, Dr. Ashton, thank you. Testosterone levels. Maybe we should check the testosterone levels of our next guest, Charles Oakley. Charles Oakley.
I think they're probably okay.
All right, but
Yes.
keep your questions coming to Dr. Ashton on our Instagram at Dr. J. Ashton.
Pfizer has applied for emergency use authorization for its COVID vaccine for children under 5. The process now moves to an FDA advisory panel set to meet in a couple of weeks. Now, if the vaccine is authorized, the CDC would need to give the final green light, and we could see those first shots by the end of the month. So let's bring in senior national policy reporter Ann Flaherty for some more on this. And what are the different ways this can play out from this point?
Well, Diane, as you said, we could see the shots by the end of the month. That's certainly exciting news for all these parents out there, probably including yourself with little ones at home. I know so many families have been waiting for this because they feel like once their kids are vaccinated, they can move on, and it moves into a different phase of the pandemic. But what I really want to caution parents out there to know is that there's still a lot of data that we're missing on this. Pfizer last month had announced that they were disappointed in the results of these trials for kids ages 2 to 4. The good news is there's no safety concerns, but it wasn't as effective as they would like. And keeping in mind that it's only about 1/10 of the size of the dose that's being given to adults, then they wanted to see if a third shot might be necessary. So we are still missing that data. And I think that one of the things we might hear from advisors in a couple weeks is that they're going to question, do we move forward now when we don't have a full picture of this, or do we wait until we have a little bit more information, because this is not an age group that is at highest risk of complications from COVID.
Well, and to that point, a recent survey found only about 30% of parents with kids under 5 say they'll get this shot right away. And we saw a lot more debate over booster shots in the medical world than we saw over the first 2 adult doses of the vaccine. So do you think we're going to see a lot more debate over this vaccine for the under 5 group, given that trial data and that debate over whether or not these are even necessary for this young age group?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an age group that's going to be the slowest uptake that we've seen of any demographic, I think because they are at lower risk, or the lowest risk. And of course, when you talk to health experts and people in the hospitals, they say, you know, look, they can still get sick. If the vaccine is to be proven safe, you're going to be it's going to be much safer to go with that option than to go with the virus. So they're going to push this hard in public health circles. But I think a lot of parents might fall into the wait and see category. We saw this with the kids ages 5 through 11. Eventually, many parents did step up and vaccinate their children. It's not unreasonable to say, I don't want to be first in line. But as public health officials say, they need to give the information to parents so that they make that right decision, talk to their pediatricians, talk to their doctors.
And Ann, we're hearing a lot about this pandemic now becoming an endemic. So what does that mean from an administrative standpoint? What can we as a country do to be better prepared as we get more surges and new variants?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that people in public health circles are talking about right now is improving access to therapeutics, ramping up production to these antiviral pills like Paxlovid, testing, increasing testing, and also creating a system for testing. You know, you can sign up online and get 4 free tests delivered to your house, but many people are getting them and they don't know what to do with them. There needs to be more of a system in place so that people are testing regularly so we can catch that next wave. And I think most importantly, we have to vaccinate the world. The United States does not live as an island. So there will always be a threat of another variant. And until we really get that vaccine equity on a global scale, I think we're still going to be dealing with these waves of COVID cases.
All right. Ann Flaherty, thank you.
President Biden has been clear that the United States will respond to the growing threat to Europe's security and stability. Our commitment to NATO, Article 5, and collective defense remains ironclad. As part of this commitment, and to be prepared for a range of contingencies, the United States will soon move additional forces to Romania, Poland, and Germany. I want to be very clear about something. These are not permanent moves. They are moves designed to respond to the current security environment. Moreover, These forces are not going to fight in Ukraine. They are going to ensure the robust defense of our NATO allies. Now, let me lay this out for you in a series of 3 steps. First, 1,000 soldiers that are currently based in Germany will reposition to Romania in the coming days. Now, this is a Stryker squadron, a mounted cavalry unit that's designed to deploy in short order and to move quickly once in place. And they will augment the some 900 U.S. forces that are currently in Romania. Now, this force is designed to deter aggression and enhance our defensive capabilities in frontline allied states. And we expect them, as I said, to move in coming days. Secretary Austin discussed this repositioning to Romania just last week in his conversation with the Romanian Minister of Defense. And again, I want to stress that this move is coming at the express invitation of the Romanian government. Second, we are moving an additional force of about approximately 2,000 troops from the United States to Europe in the next few days. The 82nd Airborne Division is deploying components of an infantry brigade combat team and key enablers to Poland, and the 18th Airborne Corps is moving a joint task force capable headquarters to Germany. Now, both of them, as you know, are based in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Collectively, this force is trained and equipped for a variety of missions to deter aggression and to reassure and to defend our allies. Not surprisingly, we work very closely with our Polish and German allies to set the stage for these movements, and we absolutely appreciate their support. Again, these are not permanent moves. They respond to current conditions. We will adjust our posture as those conditions evolve. Third, and finally, all of these forces are separate and in addition to the 8,500 personnel in the United States on heightened alert posture that I announced last week. Those 8,500 are not currently being deployed but remain ready to move if called for the NATO response force or as needed for other contingencies as directed by the Secretary or by President Biden. We continue to review our force posture and the situation in Europe, and we will make adjustments as the situation warrants. We do not know if Russia has made a final decision to further invade Ukraine, but it clearly has that capability. The Department of Defense will continue to support diplomatic efforts led by the White House and the State Department to press for resolution. We do not believe conflict is inevitable. The United States, in lockstep with our allies and partners, has offered Russia a path to de-escalate. But we will take all prudent measures to assure our own security and that of our allies.
We're also hearing from former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores after learning he's suing the NFL and 3 teams for alleged racial discrimination. Flores was thought to be on the short list for some of the most high-profile jobs in football, but now he's accusing the league of being managed like a plantation. ABC's Trevor Ault has the latest.
Former Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores speaking out for the first time after accusing the NFL of racial discrimination.
We need change. We need change. I know many very capable black coaches, some of my staff who I know, if given an opportunity or when given an opportunity, are going to go and do a great job on their interview.
In a proposed class action lawsuit filed Monday, Flores says the league remains rife with racism, particularly when it comes to the hiring and retention of black head coaches, coordinators, and general managers. In the last month, Flores was fired after back-to-back winning seasons in Miami and then passed over for the top job with the New York Giants. In his lawsuit, Flores says just last week the Giants invited him to interview for its head coaching vacancy, but Flores, who spent 10 years under Bill Belichick with the Patriots, says days before that meeting, his former boss mistakenly sent him these text messages saying the job had already gone to Brian Daboll, a white coach. He alleges that in 2019, when the Denver Broncos interviewed him, the team executives were disheveled, adding it was obvious they were drinking heavily the night before, accusations the team says are blatantly false. They, too, later hired a white coach. Flores is now calling both meetings sham interviews. He believes they were only granted to satisfy the league's 20-year-old Rooney Rule, which mandates teams interview at least one minority candidate for top positions. But the Giants say they are confident with the process that resulted in the hiring of Brian Daboll. The NFL responding to the allegations in a statement saying diversity is core to everything we do, and there are few issues on which our clubs and our internal leadership team spend more time. We will defend against these claims, which are without merit.
There are still 5 head coaching vacancies, but as of right now, there is only one black head coach in the NFL. And Brian Flores says he knows he's risking his chances of ever coaching again by filing this lawsuit, but he said it had to be done to enact change, and he's hoping other people will join him in taking a stand. Diane?
Trevor Alt, thank you. And I want to bring in ABC News contributor and host of the Long Game podcast, LZ Granderson, for more on this. LZ, Flores says that he was interviewed for these jobs, but he calls them sham interviews, pointing to the Rooney Rule. Can you explain the Rooney Rule and Flores' argument here?
Sure, absolutely. Basically, the Rooney Rule has been in existence in the NFL for about 20 years. And the reason why it came to be was because there was an issue with the hiring practice in the NFL. Prior to the Rooney Rule, the first African-American or black head coach was hired in 1989. I was a senior in high school before the NFL even had one black coach. And so the Rooney Rule was put in place in order to try to correct that. Unfortunately, what has now happened is that owners and teams are now fulfilling the obligations of the Rooney Rule, which requires teams to interview at least 2 minority candidates for positions. But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to move on from the interview process to actually being hired. So when the Rooney Rule was put in place, there were 2 black head coaches in the NFL. Today it's down to 1.
Now, the NFL says diversity is core to everything we do. And yet, when you look at the number of black players versus the number of black coaches, a.k.a. 1, there's obviously a huge disparity there. So what more needs to be done? The Rooney Rule clearly isn't getting the job done. So what do you do from here?
I'm so sick of the NFL talking about how important diversity is to it when we have been having this conversation for 20 years. Like, how do they even rationalize saying that, knowing that they had to put a rule in just to interview us to begin with? How is diversity a core value? You just got your first openly gay player. How is diversity a core value? Dave Coupe came out in the 70s. You just got your first openly gay one this season. So diversity can't be your core value. Diversity is something that you say to get people off your back, that you're working on things. We'll put on a decal. We'll put in end racism in our end zone. Because at the end of the day, we're too popular of a sport to actually be held accountable. You know, the ratings for these past playoff games were double-digit jumps in terms of viewership. The NFL just signed a multi-billion-dollar broadcasting rights deal that was twice the amount of the previous deal. So the owners know all of this. They know they don't have to change. And so we're having these conversations about the hiring practices and what needs to happen. And they can talk about diversity being a core factor. But the reality is that we don't see that in terms of hiring and in leadership. You just got over the fact that you didn't want a black person to be a quarterback. That was recent. So what's really is a sham, Diane, is this notion that the NFL ownership group are sincere in these statements.
And LZ, quickly, because I want to ask you about Washington, too, but what do you make of the text from Bill Belichick and its role in all of this?
Well, I mean, Bill was congratulating a former assistant, and perhaps in the future he'll remember to type a last name because it doesn't appear Brian was good enough for him to keep them all separated. But it's a key piece of evidence because it shows that the interview that Brian Flores was headed to with the New York Giants was a sham interview because Bill Belichick already knew they were planning on hiring the white coach 3 days before Brian Flores was even interviewed. So it's incredible evidence. And if I could just add one more thing, so far there have been 4 white head coaches hired. You add all 4 of those white head coaches together, they still don't have as many winning seasons as Brian Flores.
All right, LZ Granderson, always great to talk to you, LZ. Thank you. For more, I'd like to bring in Senior Vice President of the Anti-Defamation League, Fred Block, for more on this. Fred, thank you for being here. We heard there in Ariel's piece Whoopi saying that the Holocaust wasn't about race because both groups were white. And now she has corrected herself, saying that Hitler and the Nazis considered Jewish people to be an inferior race. Do you think her apology and her clarification is enough? And why is that distinction so important?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on this morning, Diane. We obviously accept her apology because we've always known Whoopi to be someone who stands up for the Jewish community. And so hopefully these 2 weeks that have been granted to her can be a time for introspection and for her and for healing for her colleagues who were hurt. It starts with the apology, but what follows is really, really important. And I hope she will reach out to colleagues. I hope she'll take some time, and ADL stands ready to help with that, to learn as much as she can do. There's much she can do. And at ADL, we actually see a lot of this. And in the end, there can be some really incredible learning and good that comes of it. And we hope that will be the situation here. I mean, we have to actually reemphasize that when you can't talk about the Holocaust without talking about race. The Nazis considered the Germans the master race and claimed that all other non-Aryans were inferior. And this is a trope that sadly we still hear echoed by white supremacists in the US today. And the ultimate result back in Nazi Germany was the slaughter of 6 million Jews, including 1.5 million children who were slaughtered in the Nazi gas chambers and death camps. So the other thing that's important to note here is that while it starts with the Jews, as the famous Holocaust scholar Deborah Lipstadt, now up for nomination for the special envoy on anti-Semitism, says it starts with the Jews but doesn't end with the Jews. Ultimately, other races, religions such as Roma, LGBTQ individuals, communists, mentally ill Catholics, all were caught up in the Nazi death machine. So, Holocaust distortion is real and dangerous. And in a world where there are people who deny the very existence of the Holocaust, everyone must be on guard to respect the Jewish memory and not give comfort to those who want to wipe out the memory from historical record.
Now, this has sparked a conversation about the definition of race and how we view it here in the U.S. We heard Whoopi there with Colbert originally trying to defend her point, saying that to her, race is about skin color. And because these two groups had the same skin color, you couldn't immediately distinguish the oppressor from the oppressed. So how do you describe what race means in this context and why that's so important to this conversation?
Well, taking a 21st century view of racism and bringing it back to Nazi Germany, I think is dangerous. Things have evolved. I mean, and this is an ever evolving issue, and it's vitally important in our communities that we talk about modern day racism in all of its forms. The Great Awakening that occurred in the spring of 2020 around the tragic murder of George Floyd was really an important turning point in this country. And there's been much more widespread acceptance of the fact that there's systemic racism. It's a serious issue, but it needs to in some way inform how we think about racism, how we talk about racism, and how we work as a society as a whole to eradicate it. And this, importantly, has been a part of the ADL mission for 108 years. It's in our mission statement that was written in 1913 that we exist to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. So it's an important conversation that has to be had.
Now, the FBI has said that Jewish people are the most targeted for religious-based hate crimes in this country. And we know, as you said, that there are plenty of people out there who deny the very existence of the Holocaust itself. So how do we combat anti-Semitism, and what in general do you want people to understand about this whole conversation?
Well, there's a lot here. There's really, vis-a-vis the Holocaust, there's nothing more important than education, especially with so much disinformation out there. We need to do our best to ensure that the historical narrative stays in place. Holocaust education has long been a priority for the ADL, something that goes hand in hand with our ongoing efforts to fight anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. We conducted our first Global 100 survey of anti-Semitic attitudes back in 2014, 100 countries surveyed. And it found that only 54% of the people polled had heard of the Holocaust. And of those, 32% believe the Holocaust accounts were greatly exaggerated. That's a troubling statistic. And but a September 2020 survey by Echoes and Reflections, which is a education partnership with ADL, the USC Shoah Foundation, and Yad Vashem, found that 8 of 10 U.S. college students have received at least some Holocaust education during high school, with 55% having watched either in person or a video survivor.
We're going to talk about that major winter storm that's slamming parts of the country right now. At least 34 states are on alert for dangerous snow and ice.
Millions are bracing for a messy commute this morning. That's a live look at the roads near Chicago right now. Let's go to Ginger. She's live in Champaign, Illinois, where the snow is coming down as well. Good morning, Ginger.
Good morning to you, Robin. The alma mater statue here at the University of Illinois, well known and now dusted, but soon the base will be buried with snow because we're anticipating anywhere from 6 to 12 inches in a huge swath. Let's go ahead and start with Denver, though, because they're in a winter storm warning, too, from this storm. They've had major accidents, semis jackknifed. You can see the plows even having trouble getting through. So you're going to see big-time commute issues for dozens of states. So anywhere from New Mexico and Texas all the way to New York and Vermont, we have alerts on the map. We time it out for you. It's morning for the first impulse as that low moves across northern Indiana, parts of Ohio. The second one, where that fire hose of moisture meets the Arctic air, ice. I'm concerned about freezing rain from even Little Rock and Memphis up through West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and yes, New York. We will be talking by Friday morning about accumulating ice in the Northeast. So this is a widespread, huge impacting storm with a bullseye of 12 plus in some parts from Fort Wayne up to, say, Jackson, Michigan. Robin.
Really messy. Okay, Ginger, thank you. The snow also falling in Chicago, as we said this morning. That's where we find our Alex Perez. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning, Robin. You can see traffic on Lakeshore Drive behind me here, kind of sparse right now and moving, which may be for the best because the Chicagoland area is bracing for a monster headache of a morning commute. Now, the rain began falling here late last night, freezing and creating a dangerous layer of ice, which is now being covered by snow that began falling overnight. The dangerous conditions creating travel headaches. Nearly 1,300 flights canceled already this morning at least 5 major airports, including right here in Chicago. And with some parts of the Chicagoland area bracing for as much as a foot of snow, authorities here are asking people to avoid travel, stay off the roads if possible. It's going to be a rough 24 hours for many. Robin?
Want everybody to stay safe. All right, Alex, thank you. To the latest on Russia and Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking for the first time in weeks about the crisis and placing the blame on the U.S. and its allies. Our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, is there on the scene for us in Ukraine. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, Robin. We're in one of these many frontline towns between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed rebels. You know, there used to be 800 people living here. Today, there are only 90 left. And with the world watching and worrying about these Russian troops at the border, Vladimir Putin speaking out, criticizing America and the West for, quote, ignoring our concerns. He thinks that NATO has broken promises by expanding into Eastern Europe, which he sees as a threat. Quote, as the people say, they played us, simply lied. Of course, the US rejecting that, saying Russia's the aggressor by invading Ukraine and gathering these troops at the border. Meanwhile, American fighter jets taking part in pre-planned military exercises in Estonia. No diplomatic breakthroughs yet, but the good news is that both sides are agreeing to continue talking. The bad is that the differences between the two still remain, and the greatest danger is right here. One small misstep between Ukraine and these rebel forces could potentially ignite a much greater conflict. Michael?
Hopefully they can talk their way through it. Ian, thank you so much.
To Capitol Hill now, and the health scare for New Mexico Senator Ben Ray Lujan, who suffered a stroke, is hospitalized and expected to make a full recovery, but it comes at a critical time for the Democratic agenda in a 50-50 Senate. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning. And this really did come as a shock to so many senators here on Capitol Hill. Democratic Senator Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico was feeling dizzy last week. He checked himself into a hospital. He found out that he suffered a stroke and had to undergo surgery to help with the swelling. His office tells us that he is expected to make a full recovery, but at this point, it's unclear just how long he will be gone from Capitol Hill. Democrats hold a razor-thin majority in the Senate, and it comes as President Biden is trying to narrow down his short list for who he will nominate to the Supreme Court. To get his pick confirmed without any Republican support, he will need the vote of every single Democratic senator. It could be weeks before President Biden announces his choice, but Democrats have already had to reshuffle their plans, pushing off votes for other key nominees. One Democratic senator telling me that this is just a reminder that in a Senate that is split 50-50, any unexpected development could serve as a challenge to Democrats in their agenda. But of course, they are wishing Senator Lujan well, George.
We all are. Rachel Scott, thanks very much.
Now to the tragedy at a college in Virginia. 2 officers shot and killed during an active shooting situation. President Biden tweeting, quote, "Another senseless shooting has taken the lives of 2 brave officers. Gun violence against law enforcement officers is sickening and it must end." Our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, has the latest. Good morning, Pierre.
Robin, good morning. Tragedy came to Bridgewater College, a small liberal arts school of only 1,500 students about 2 hours southwest of Washington, D.C. Just after 1 p.m. yesterday, campus police officers John Painter and J.J. Jefferson were responding to a report of a suspicious man near a building that houses classrooms and offices. After a brief encounter, the suspect pulled out a gun and shot the officers and then fled. The 2 officers, who were good friends and known as the Dynamic Duo, died at the scene despite the desperate effort to save them. The suspect, identified as Alexander Campbell, aged 27, was arrested a short distance away. Police recovered multiple guns on and off campus. We have no motive, but you get the sense this terrible violence could have been much worse. Michael?
Terrible indeed, Pierre. Thank you so much for that.
Tom Brady officially announcing his retirement after a Hall of Fame career. We're going to talk exclusively with Brady's longtime body coach, close friend, and business partner in a minute. First, TJ Holmes joins us with what Brady's post-NFL life could look like. Good morning.
And guys, this is not just a celebration of his greatness on the field, his accomplishments. So this is really a testament to the greatness of his longevity. The man is 44 years old in a league that most careers are over by the age of 30. He's 44. Not just that he's 44, he actually led the NFL this year in passing yards and passing touchdowns at the age of 44. So why would he decide that he's going to give it up now? He says there's a 100% competitive commitment that he needs to the game, and that's not something he's willing to do anymore.
Brady's going to hand it off. It's Fournette. He's going to take it to the end zone.
After 22 seasons and 7 Super Bowl wins, Tom Brady is officially retiring from football.
It was an honor, privilege just to watch you compete. Absolutely incredible career. Best ever do it.
It's an unbelievable feat on his part, but what he's done for us is monumental and will transcend many generations.
His wife of nearly 13 years, supermodel Gisele Bundchen, writing, "I am in awe of your dedication and of everything you have achieved. You're the most dedicated, focused, and mentally tough person I have ever met." The storied athlete got his start at the University of Michigan, spent his first 2 years there as a backup.
Tom Brady at pick 198 goes to the New England Patriots.
Then in 2000, Brady was the 199th pick in the NFL draft. The New England Patriots gave him a shot that would forever change that franchise and the sport.
There's nobody that's produced at his level, at his age, not in football, not at that position. He's done things that nobody else ever has in terms of productivity and longevity.
His commitment to physical greatness set him apart. Brady's retiring on top, the highest earning NFL player of all time. His longtime body coach, Alex Guerrera, joked on Instagram Tuesday that he's updating my resume after the announcement. Brady and his wife are notoriously health conscious. 80% of their diet is veggies and whole grains. He spoke to Strahan just last year about his journey.
I know a lot of that has to do with the way you take care of yourself.
For an athlete, your body is your asset. What I eat, what I drink, how I work out, all those things cumulatively add up.
The 44-year-old launched his Brady apparel brand just last month.
He was one of the best human beings that you could hang around. Truly humble, would give you the shirt off his back, great teammate,
Brady also expressed his commitment to his wife and 3 kids, writing in his retirement announcement that they are my greatest achievement. I always came off the field and home to the most loving and supportive wife who has done everything for our family to allow me to focus on my career.
Football has centered me in so many ways. It's like such a singular purpose that I think when I don't have that, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for me.
And a lot of people might have noticed, he had kind of that long message, retirement message. There's a point, he's writing, you're reading, and then you come to this point, he says, Te amo, amor de minha vida. He's speaking in Portuguese directly to his wife, Giselle, saying, I love you, love of my life. So that gives you just a little nugget there of him, how he's been talking about his family a lot lately, how they were going to be a part of this. And one more greatness note, the man has 7 Super Bowl wins. That is more than any NFL franchise has in its history.
That says something.
Including the Patriots. Yeah. They have 6. He got them all of those, went to Tampa and got him another one. So he's even ahead of them. It's just remarkable what he's done.
And now it's time to go home and spend time with the family.
With the family. He sounds very excited to do so.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you so much, TJ. This morning here in New York City, thousands of officers are expected to pay their respects at the funeral of NYPD officer Wilbert Mora at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Mora and his partner were fatally shot while responding to a domestic violence call. Phil Lipoff is at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Good morning, Phil.
Michael, good morning. Sadness and grief will once again fill St. Patrick's Cathedral as the funeral for Officer Wilbert Mora will take place in just a few hours. The second of 2 NYPD officers killed in the line of duty in just the last 2 weeks. Yesterday, Officer Mora's wake was held here. Hundreds came through to pay their respects to the 27-year-old who died trying to make New York City a safer place. Mora and his partner, Jason Rivera, were ambushed answering a domestic violence call January 21st. Rivera was killed there at the scene. He was just 22. His funeral held here last week, and when you hear about that sea of blue, this is exactly what it looked like. Law enforcement officers from all across the country, thousands lined Fifth Avenue, 20 deep for 20 blocks. Here in New York City, that's a mile long, a powerful show of support. We are expecting to see a similar outpouring today. Officer Mora was hospitalized for 4 days before he died, and in one last act of heroism, donated his organs so that 5 others may live. And in the aftermath of this shooting and several others here in the city, New York City Mayor Eric Adams reached out demanding federal help. Tomorrow, President Biden comes to New York City to meet with Mayor Adams to talk about gun violence. Guys.
Man, it's such a serious problem. Okay, Phil, thanks very much.
Now with a newly released video of the brave Waffle House shooting hero, James Shaw, testifying in court about those terrifying moments. Janae Norman has more for us. Good morning, Janae.
Robin, good morning to you. That trial was delayed for several months as the accused shooter, Travis Reinking, was treated for schizophrenia and cleared once again to stand trial. He's pleaded not guilty, but prosecutors argue he knew exactly what he was doing.
Never-before-seen surveillance video from the deadly 2018 shooting at a Nashville area Waffle House playing out in court as the trial against the accused gunman intensifies. Here you see the dining room full of people. Then glass flying through the air as bullets pierce the windows. Watch as customers dive for cover, gunfire raining from the shooter's semi-automatic weapon. Then, in an act of pure bravery and courage ignited by terror, the man hailed as the Waffle House hero, James Shaw, confronts the gunman who had just charged inside the restaurant, forcing the shooter back out. Look again, right there, as Shaw throws the shooter to the ground. A struggle ensues before Shaw wrestles away the AR-15, still so hot from gunfire it burned his hands. Shaw recalling the heart-pounding moments when he took the stand Monday for the prosecution.
I finally get the gun and I throw it, and I watch the gun look like it was in the air for days, and I just watched it glide and glide and glide, and it finally went over the bar.
There, behind the service counter, 2 employees lying on the ground inches from the rifle that had just claimed 4 lives. 23-year-old Aquila Da Silva, 21-year-old D'Ebony Groves, 29-year-old Teron Sunderland, 20-year-old Joe Perez.
Just ran through the door thinking it's either going to be me or him, or it's going to be, death. We'll see what happens.
Reinking indicted on 17 counts, including 4 counts of premeditated murder.
And again, Reinking has entered a plea of not guilty by way of insanity. Day 3 of testimony continues today. The judge says 62 witnesses in all are expected to take the stand throughout the trial. Incredible video and hearing him relive those moments, guys.
Really was, Janae. Thank you for sharing that.